Is death natural? To learn St. Thomas's answer to this question, stick around. Hello, my name is Father Ambrose Little, and I teach philosophy at the Dominican House of Studies. Welcome to Aquinas 101, Ask a Friar, the series where I do my best to answer your big questions about philosophy, theology, and more. One of our viewers asked, are death and decay proper to the natural world and merely originally suspended for men? Or was the original plan for humans not to be subject to death and the rest of the world was subject to it? Or is all death in the entire created order simply a consequence of original sin? The answer is that for St. Thomas, death and decay are natural, and that death was originally suspended for men by a grace called original justice. St. Thomas addresses this question in a number of places, but usually does so in relation to Romans chapter 5, verse 12, where St. Paul writes, quote, "Therefore, just as through one person sin entered the world, and through sin death, and thus death came to all, inasmuch as all sinned." End quote. In this passage from St. Paul, it seems clear that the all to whom death came are all human beings, not all creation. After all, non-rational creatures do not sin, only humans do. So only all human beings can have sinned in Adam, and so the punishment of death is a human punishment. In his commentary on this passage from Romans, St. Thomas sets up the dialectic by arguing that death is natural. He notes, quote, "It seems that death does not arise from sin, but from nature, being due to the presence of matter. For the human body is composed of contrary elements, and, therefore, is corruptible of its very nature." End quote. This point is, in fact, one that St. Thomas agrees with. By their very nature, all material things are corruptible. He writes, quote, "The answer is that human nature can be considered in two ways. In one way, according to its structural principles, and then death is natural. By extension, we can see that if humans are corruptible by nature, surely the rest of material creation is also naturally corruptible and subject to death. This is not contrary to the perfection of creation in its origin. In fact, St. Thomas argues it is part of the perfection of creation that there are corruptible creatures. He writes, quote, "Although a corruptible thing would be better if it possessed incorruptibility, it is better for the universe to be made of both corruptible and incorruptible things than to be made merely of the latter, because the nature of the corruptible thing, as well as that of the incorruptible, is good, and it is better to have two goods than merely one." End quote. So according to St. Thomas, non-human material beings were subject to death by nature, even in paradise. How was man preserved from death if death is natural to a material body? Through a grace called original justice. St. Thomas writes, quote, "Divine providence planned immortality for man on account of the worth of the rational soul, which, being incorruptible, deserved an incorruptible body." End quote. In other words, the fact that humans have a rational soul means that we have an immaterial and immortal part of ourselves. Therefore, it was fitting for God to give man immortality at his creation for the sake of the immortal part of man. So St. Thomas writes, quote, "The divine power furnished that which was lacking to human nature by giving the soul the power to maintain the body incorruptible." End quote. When our first parents fell, they turned their gaze from God and thus cut themselves off from that precious gift. And thus, through Adam, death entered the world. Thankfully, that was not the end of the story. Through his saving death, Jesus not only offered us salvation from death and gave us immortality, he also gave us a supernatural life with him, which is a far greater gift than even Adam and Eve could have imagined. We cannot thank him enough for this precious gift, and I would encourage you to meditate on this mystery. That's all I have for you today. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Ask a Friar. I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, may God bless you and keep you in his grace. I hope that answers all your questions, but if not, please let us know by submitting more using hashtag AskAFriar in the YouTube comments and on social media. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with your friends, because it matters what you think.